Fire Engineering Radio, to our show Pride and Ownership, the love for the job. I'm your host, Chief Rick Lasky, and we just got through taking care of a lot of different issues and some different tasks related to our hurricane that hit in the Gulf of Mexico. We were able to open up one of our shelters here in Louisville and accommodate the needs of some of the evacuees. Sent a crew down to help shuttle some folks, especially those non-ambulatory folks, if you will, from the nursing homes and for some of the care facilities to a place where they can be sheltered properly and taken care of. And we're getting ready to do it again with Hurricane Ike. That was Gustav, and actually, the neat thing about the whole deal and visiting with some of the folks from FEMA and our boss there, and just things worked really well. It's sad, and we can't turn back the hands of time and necessarily change what happened during Katrina and even Rita and some of the other things. But what we can do is take care of the future. And it was nice to see. I know there was a few hiccups here and there, but to see how smooth things went, and we were able to move a lot of people, get them taken care of. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with the fact that that storm came in and didn't do all the damage they were expecting. That's actually a good thing. It'll just be something we're going to be dealing with long into the future. But proud of a lot of folks from all over the country that did a great job from all the different entities and all the different governmental agencies. So it was pretty cool. Good job by all, and hats off to everybody. One more reminder about Fire Engineering's weekend in Fort Worth coming up in October. October 25th and 26th, Chief Halton, Bobby Halton, our editor-in-chief, actually has separated that program out into 2 days, so you can sign up for one day or the other. I know they're giving away each day a past FDIC, which is worth about $1,000, and they're giving away a software program of computers. For if you send 3 or more people, you qualify to be drawn for this $40,000 software program, training program. If you're curious, email Chief Bobby Halton. He'll be happy to fill you in on that. If you're curious about the software program, you can email or get a hold of Chief Curtis Burt with the Lake Cities Fire Department in Lake Cities, Texas. And that email address for Curtis is cburt, B-I-R-T, at lakecitiesfire.com. And he could tell you how much he enjoys that product. So hopefully we get to see you there and enjoy a great weekend with a lot of great speakers. Take the chooch from Louisville out of the picture. There's some great instructors there going to deliver some great programs. Last show we had Battalion Chief Dave Rhodes from the Atlanta Fire Department, City of Atlanta. Dave served there as a union president for 8 years and still heavily involved. And as we all know, Atlanta's going through some tough times budget-wise. A lot of cuts, a lot of things hurting. There's a lot of cities going through some tough times right now, whether it's fuel costs or whatever. One of the things that I run up against when I travel all over North America is a lot of our firefighters, some of our senior staff members, but a lot of young firefighters have never really heard from the other side of the coin, if you will, how this all works, how this all happens, where the money comes from, all the different needs. We sometimes in the fire service, and I have no problem in this, you get caught up living in a vacuum where you think it's all about you. It's all about the fire department. You forget that you've got a police department to worry about. You've got public works. There's so many different, from the library to the city secretary's office to the person running your GIS division. Everybody is critical and has an important role. But what does it take to run that? And I'm very fortunate. Today I've invited my boss, Claude King, the city manager from the city of Louisville in Texas. Not to embarrass him by no means, but if you've listened to the show before, pretty much every show I brag on my boss and my bosses and my mayor and council, because I truly am blessed. We work in a city where they absolutely demand that you find new and innovative ways to take care of your internal customers, your employees, and the external customers. And for an organization like this fire department, that's exciting. So, Mr. King, welcome to our show.
Thanks, Rick.
Well, and we just finished a staff meeting, and I'm amazed. Last night, boss, I sat through a council meeting, and I don't know how you do it. I mean, we're blessed. We've got great, absolutely incredible city council members and a mayor. I don't know how you pull it off. I mean, a lot of folks don't I don't think they've ever seen what goes on behind closed doors, or how you keep those relationships. How do you make it all happen with them? How do you keep them
it's a balancing act, and I think a lot is related to the personalities that are at the top and the leadership positions of the council itself. So if you've got people there that have the community's interests at heart and are not too focused on individual agendas and trying to work with each other to make slow, gradual progress, I think it makes it a lot easier for the manager to balance things out and get results. And I've been fortunate in my career to have that kind of experience. Virtually all the councils I've worked for have operated that way. And unfortunately, you see in some cities where they don't operate that way, and that tends to detract from the overall mission of every department within the city, and the priorities wind up getting set somewhere else, and the next thing you know, you're having problems of various kinds. And so, again, I think it helps if the people who elect officials elect the right folks and get them in there and hold them accountable for running things the way they should be run. And in Louisville, that's been the case for some time.
Well, but it does. And again, not to pump up anybody's sales here, but you and Donna Barron and Steve Backus, your two partners, our two assistant city managers, I mean, you three make it. I've watched how it's a whole, it's not just a balancing act, I think. I mean, it just takes so much work. And you're right, if you end up with egos interfering, like you see in some cities or some places across the country, it just kind of boogers up the whole thing, where it makes it hard to do the good stuff that you wanted to do in the first. Well, let me back up even for a second with that. When you talk about wanting to do the good stuff when it comes to public service, how did you get involved in the whole public service side of things?
Well, actually, it started right after I got out of school. I went to University of North Texas, just up the road in Denton in the 70s. I won't say exactly when, but it's been a long time. And after I got out of school there, I was going to graduate school, thinking about a business career, and started working for the Texas Department of Mental Health, Mental Retardation, which is a public agency that now goes under a different name here in Texas, but they provide services to those in need of mental health or other types of areas related to the mental health field. And worked with them for more than 10 years, and gradually that evolved into working with group home placements in communities. And in part of doing that, I was involved in zoning cases and periodic discussions with city leaders and staff in cities, and trying to place group homes for those in need of that type of facility. And one thing led to another, started going back to school to work on a public administration degree, and thought that working for a city might be an interesting career path, and that's the way it went. Started working here for the city of Louisville while I was still in graduate school, getting that MPA degree, and have been here ever since, now going on 20 years. It'll be 20 years next June.
And interesting to say the least when it comes. Well, and you mentioned wanting to get, maybe get into the business community, business world, and working towards that end of it. I've also referred to, and I know you have several times when I've listened to the classes you've taught on just that. It's a corporate. If you were going to explain to a young firefighter out there the difference between a business corporation in the private sector and the corporation, if you will, that you're running. I mean, because we're selling water. I mean, how do you do that? First of all, what's the difference between the private sector and what you're doing?
Well, there's probably more similarities than differences. Like you said, we sell water as a product that we produce. We sell sewer services. The difference in that is that there's probably not the competitive choices out there for the consumer that there might be for other products. Similarly, in the area of parks and leisure services, or for that matter, police and fire, the city has kind of a monopoly on the service, so you don't have the same type of marketplace environment that you're operating within that you would in a business environment. However, you're still charged as a manager, you as a manager of the fire chief or fire department, whether it's police chief or me as the manager of the city, with making sure that you're running things the most effective, cost-effective, efficient way possible. And I think a lot of the same types of principles that are involved in business training apply themselves in that area. So whether it's budgeting or whether it's trying to find the best deal out there on equipment or finding the best equipment for the job, all of those types of things lap over into this public sector work and are applicable Right now you're building a new firehouse for Louisville, and just managing a project, for example. A lot of the same principles that are involved in the private sector apply in that type of a project. So I think there's a lot of similarities. The differences, I suppose, again, you got the marketplace differences, and of course then you've got the area of politics that's a little bit different.
Well, and I think also, boss, we've talked about this before, you don't have the luxury of being able to, there's laws that you have to follow, there's everything from purchasing practices, you have to jump through all kinds of flaming hoops to make stuff happen with a city, where if I was the CEO of the XYZ Corporation, I can pick who I want, choose who I want, purchase from who I want, make sure I don't violate anybody's civil rights. I understand that, but pretty much they've got an open end to do things. But I think it's harder. I think it's much harder to do what you're doing, just because of all the regulations. It's got to be tough.
It's probably a little bit more restrictive. I think that the private sector has its own set of rules and restrictions, and that can be equally complicating. But generally speaking, government does tend to get bogged down with a lot of different types of red tape and rules and regulations, a lot of which come out of other parts of government, like the state or the federal government, that are beyond our control, and we just have to operate within that environment. That's part of the game that we play, and the more we understand how that works, the better off we usually are. So,
well, right now one of our teammates, they're out trimming the bushes, pals, out at our memorial, getting ready for our 9/11 deal. So if anybody hears that, they're hard at work in Louisville right now. If you hear that in the background,
say outside your door.
Yeah, outside. Either that, or usually we tell Peter that we're trying to add the atmosphere when the guys lead out of here and the sirens start blasting. That we're trying to just give it a little bit to the show. But now, and here's the big question that I try, and I never really explain this well because I'm not in your shoes, obviously. When people ask, but how do you balance? I mean, we're the fire department, and everybody knows where public safety is with a lot of how the citizens feel. But how do you balance it, boss, when it comes to the library's needs, public services? I mean, you've heard me when we teach the classes together that there's not a position in this city that is invaluable. I mean, I think it would have been gone a long time ago if it didn't provide an extremely valuable service to what you're looking for with your organization. How do you balance everything and keep our firefighters from whining when they think that they're not getting something, that they forget that there's all these other people you got to worry about?
Yeah, and I wouldn't use the term whining. I don't think anyone really. Well, every department has its needs and its desires for doing things better and more effectively, and usually that involves some level of resources, and it's not unusual for every department to want to do a better job and to need those resources. So balancing out the resource pie is one of the more difficult things that a city does, and generally speaking, that follows the priorities that the citizens within the city itself have. If the citizens want certain types of things and they indicate a willingness to pay for them, then we'll do the best we can to accommodate that and maintain that as a priority. If they find that the pie is shrinking and it's more difficult to spend money on priority A rather than on priority B, then we have to make adjustments and maybe do some cutting back of priority A. So it generally tends to follow those citizen priorities and the willingness that citizens have to pay for those priorities. And luckily for public service, or for public safety rather, those tend to be on the higher end of the priority list. And that's not to say that they're necessarily more important or valuable than something else. It's just that the citizens see those as something that they'd rather take care of first and maybe take care of some other things second, third, and fourth down the list. So we balance that out through the priorities of the citizens reflected by the council people that are elected by those citizens.
Well, and I've told our guys, Claude, before that, I try to remind them that, not only are we not the only show in town, but, the guy or gal in public services that is trying to get a backhoe for their department, that backhoe is just as important to them as a defibrillator or turnout gear stuff. And that is, from my end, that's the hard part here, is reminding our young firefighters, because the senior guys are pretty good with it because they've been around it. There's more, and that I try to. My mission is to explain what you're trying to do. Is just, I don't know how you do it.
Well, I think a lot of that's it's education. It's making sure that people understand how all this fits together. It's making sure that whether it's guys in your department or guys in the police department or public works or the citizens at large, is making sure that they understand that all of these things have a place. All of these services that we deliver as a city have a role and a place in people's lives, and some of them may be perceived as more important. Of course, as we've said many times, people don't perceive flushing the toilet as very important until they flush it and nothing happens.
Exactly. Or we turn on a fire hydrant, nothing. In fact, just outside Atlanta, there was a big article about the citizens helping stretch fire hose because in a unincorporated area, they were hitting the hydrants, and none of the hydrants were working.
Right.
That's a bad thing.
That kind of situation comes up. That's a bad thing for everybody involved, and the citizens will be the first ones to let you know about it. So generally, most of what we do, I would think in most cities, but certainly here in Louisville, are things that the citizens deem as roughly equal priorities. I think if they're forced to pick and choose certain things, they're going to put certain things at the top and certain things second, third place. But generally speaking, my experience has been that they really hate to choose between flushing the toilet or getting an ambulance response or having a park. They really like to have all of those things because they feel like that's just all part and parcel of the quality of life in a community, and it's up to the elected officials and the management to make that happen at a reasonable cost, and that's the trick. That's the trick, is trying to keep that equation running the way it should be and balancing out all those needs and desires.
Well, and whether it's, if the people aren't, if they're happy with police and fire, but the streets are falling apart or their driveways are collapsing or whatever it is, it's all those different needs. And I've told people before, Claude, that if just because your program doesn't get approved or what you think is important, it doesn't mean that it's out of picture. It means maybe right now there's just, maybe for a couple of years.
Timing is always critical. Yeah, timing is always a critical element. Nothing happens overnight, certainly not in a municipality. And again, the resource pie is something that evolves as well over time. Here in Louisville, we've moved from a population when I started here of about 40,000 to we're up 95,000 plus, and our budget was 10 or 15 million, and now in general fund it's over 60 million. And so we couldn't do half the things that we're doing now back in 1989 when I started. Some of those things have had to evolve over time as resources became available, as the city grew, and then, of course, the trick then is to be able to keep those things happening over time, depending on what happens with the resources and the revenues of the city, and balance out the overall economics of the city so that you don't get faced with a situation of having to cut back on something that you added. So a lot of services that you're certainly familiar with, a good example is the dive team. I think our dive team, which is one of the best in the country,
absolutely,
and something that we really didn't even have back in 1989, has now evolved into where the service or the resources that provide for those services are now matching up with that level of service. And I don't think there's anybody in the city, or certainly not the citizens or the council, that would say, gee, I think we can just do without that because we want to spend money on something else. So again, things happen over time. If you don't get it this year, it may be something that you're going to get in a smaller way next year, and then you build toward full service delivery or the full option over time.
Well, and I wanted to kind of mention something here in the middle of this is, and for our listeners, is I've got my boss on the show right now, not because he's my boss, is because of the kind of boss he is, the kind of leader he is, and I've worked with, I've been bragging about Wendy up in Coeur d'Alene. When I had Chief Gabriel Kenny on the show, Claude, I was talking about Wendy. She was an incredible boss, and when people come and want to kind of woo you to another job or whatever, it's like, God, I don't know, This is good. I mean, it's not about size of departments and that, but I just want to mention, Claude, even if I wasn't working here, you're the kind of leader I would want to be interviewing with this, because that's what I tell people. They don't get it, Claude. When we go out and teach a class, and the first thing is, I can't believe they're cutting. I'm like, I know. In some places, yes, I can understand. I think you got a legitimate fight, but in a lot of places, you got to understand what's going on at City Hall and what it takes to run this city. And I wanted to ask you this next question, is because this is always, the big one is, where does the money come from to run the city? Where do you get,
Well, it differs from city to city, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Each state does things a little bit differently. Each city across the state does things differently. So in our particular case, we have two major sources of funding for general fund activities, and one is a sales tax. That's a 1% sales tax that's granted to us by the state of Texas, and then the other is the property tax, which everyone's probably familiar with no matter where you live. And that's basically it. We have a variety of non-tax revenues that come from other sources that make up about a third of our budget, and then sales tax and property tax, respectively, are another third apiece. So it's a fairly simple revenue structure. We don't get any kind of revenue sharing from the state of Texas, unlike many states that have income taxes. Texas does not, so that type of revenue doesn't occur here. So we're more or less independent. We pretty much know what we're looking at each year based on those three revenue sources. And so, again, when you're planning these things out, and you're looking at what you can do today versus what you can do tomorrow, part of that trick is making sure that you're planning well enough ahead into the future to where you don't overreach. Some of the problem, I think, some people sometimes look at resources and say, well, gee, we need this right now. We got to have it right now, and it'd be great if you could get it right now. But if you overreach and you get things too fast, or if you build too much into your budget or your cost picture, you can overreach your revenue structure as well, and then you find yourself having to cut back or going back and forth like a pendulum swinging as revenue appears or disappears. And one of the problems in our case with the sales tax is it tends to be a pretty volatile source of revenue. It can go up when the economy is doing great, and like right now when you're having a little bit of stress in the economy, it can drop off pretty dramatically too. If you build your cost structure around sales tax that's always there, you're going to find yourself in a position of having to cut that back someday. That's something we try to avoid. We try to make slower, steadier progress and not overreach those revenues too dramatically, so that if they do fall off, we're in a position to balance and not have to reduce service delivery.
Well, and I was just saying, Claude, it's often, I often find myself explaining to the troops that, first of all, the city, I believe, and again, this is my ignorance to it, is the reserves you have to keep. There's a portion that, depending on your budget, that you have to have for when the $500,000 pump. I mean, we
maintain a 15% operating reserve. Basically, any of your rating agencies, your financial entities, are going to look for that as a starting point. They're just going to look for a minimum of 15% of your operating budget set aside as a reserve. We tend to maintain higher reserves than that, partly because of the way that the rating agencies look at that as a source of flexibility for the future. In the event that you do have significant revenue problems, you can still keep services going by tapping those reserves if you have to. So we tend to maintain a little bit more than that for that purpose. And then, of course, again, it gets kind of back into the division of the pie. There's other things going on in the city. We're building Station 7 over on the south side of the city, but we're also building a park on the east side of the city, and we're also building a jail next door to you. And so from time to time, you're going to have those needs to finance projects. And generally speaking, we don't use reserves for operating expenses. I discourage councils from doing that because I think it's just putting off the inevitable. You have to have that ongoing revenue to provide services, or you probably ought to cut your services back.
Well, and you can't use, I know you've taught me this, and a lot of our folks here, one of the big points here is you can't take one-time money to fund. When guys say, "Well, why didn't they use that money to give us more of a raise?" you can't take something that's maybe not going to be there next year.
Yeah, that's what I was just referring. You're just essentially putting off the inevitable. You're going to have a recurring source of revenue for a recurring expense. So, you could tap reserves this year, but then what are you going to do next year and the year after that? Eventually, you're going to have to bite the bullet and pay for those things. And so we try to structure that for the council so that they have the choices for funding that type of thing within an operating budget that has recurring revenue. And it's not that we haven't done it before. Every now and then, council say, well, we think we'll have the revenue next year, and so we'll go ahead and pay for this out of reserves this year. But again, I feel like as a manager, I need to advise them that that's not the best way to do it, and it tends to hamstring them when they're trying to fund other projects that might be one-time sources or one-time uses of funds.
And a lot of our folks, a lot of our firefighters, I think sometimes, forget. And I tell them to look at the big picture, bosses, is the council members have people, the people are voting them in that are, nipping at their heels saying, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? Why aren't you taking care of this? And, they're trying to represent everybody as well and make sure that different projects.
The community has many needs.
Yeah.
Many needs. And fire protection is one of them, and police protection is another, and parks is another. And so the council has to weigh that out and do some prioritization, frankly, at some point in time, because, we kid a lot about how people want everything you give them, but a lot of them aren't willing to pay for it. And frankly, that's something that's beginning to rear its ugly head in a variety of places. I think you mentioned Atlanta. I don't know if that's really what's driving things there, but you and I have talked about Florida and other locations, California, where you have taxpayers that are saying, okay, wait a minute, now the prices of these things are getting a little bit too high, and now what can you do about bringing the price down? And so at that point, you really have to start doing some pretty heavy prioritization, and the council really has to have a good feel for what is it that the citizens want to pay for, and what are they willing to give up if they're not willing to pay for it.
Well, and some of the long-reaching stuff too, Claude, is I tell my guys if you try to get them to remind them to think big picture and that what we're doing, simple things like we're trying to do our best ambulance billing wise. I think the ambulance billing staff here brought in a little over $1.2 million last year, which is definitely good. I don't call it revenue as much as it's rescued revenue, because we're not generating.
That's a more effective way of collecting that revenue. The problem that we had, as you're well aware before, was that we were just ineffective at collecting it, and we came up with a different way of approaching that problem. And simply by changing the way that we were doing things, you produced a significant source of revenue that was really there before. It's not like we've increased anybody's taxes to get it or changed anyone's billings to get it. We're collecting what we're billing more effectively. And, and those are the types of new and innovative approaches I think that everybody needs to take a look at when it's easy to set a tax rate and say, okay, we're just going to collect another penny from everybody out there on their ad valorem taxes, but it may be easier and more legitimate to say, okay, wait a minute, we need to do things over here better, more efficiently, more effectively than we've done them before, and that reduces the burden on the taxpayer accordingly, and then it keeps you from having the kinds of problems that some of these locations are beginning to have.
Well, my buddy Tom Freeman, I think you met Tom when he came down here, I think right after I started 8 years ago, from the Chief Freeman from the Live Woodridge Fire District outside Chicago. And Tom's we tease him, he's like the Rain Man. That's his nickname, because he and Glenn Corbett are
I watched you and him on a fire there on the south side.
That's right. That's right. And Tom's the one that taught me when he was we were going through and I was being educated on budget process and that. And he said his thing was, I said, well, it's the old, you have to do more with less. He goes, no, you really need to try and do more with what you already have before you do more with less. And that's making sure that you're really using the money the way you should be using the money. And
that can keep you from having to do more with less.
Well,
because if you don't, you're going to be forced into that situation eventually anyhow. So you might as well get used to the idea of trying to make those improvements, look behind every rock, look behind every door to see if there's something else that you can do that makes sense, that exploits what you have better.
Well, and I've told my guys, and I go out and tell people are amazed when I travel and they say, your guys just redid the tile in the shower stalls at the firehouse. Your guys did the plumbing. Your guys, I said, well, yeah, they're certified plumbers. All that, these guys are, they're all off duty doing things. And actually, it's got to a point, you've seen it here, Claude, where they'd rather do the work themselves than an outsider. Forget saving the city money. That's a pride thing. But, when you can do stuff internally that you don't have to hire somebody from outside to take care of your home, your firehouse, in the long run, isn't that what we're trying to do with doing more with what we already have?
A good example. That's just one of the ways that you can keep those costs from floating out into the budget and impacting you in a way that just adds another 20 or 25%. That 20 or 25% on any given project can be a significant part of the budget that can go to something far more important. A set of replacement gear isn't. That's a significant expense for any given person, but it's in the big picture, it's not that significant, and so there shouldn't be any reason why you can't replace gear relatively quickly if you look around for ways to make that happen. And maybe that's one of the ways you have to do it is on this other project you save a little bit by doing it internally or cutting something back a little bit, and then you have enough money to go out and take care of the things that you really don't have much choice on.
Well, and some guys they're appalled when they find out. They say, I can't believe you're doing that. I'm like, but I don't have to really ask. They actually come in. I know they.
Yeah, generally they love to do that kind of stuff, and that's the same across most of the departments. Parks is, in fact, Parks and your department have worked together on internally doing projects at great savings to the taxpayer. And so I think a lot of people almost look at those opportunities as kind of special moments where they can actually do something that's a little out of the ordinary and use their own skills that don't typically come into play during the course of their normal job and contribute something back to the organization that helps it accomplish its mission somewhere else on down the line.
Well, and one of the points I was making with the guys the other day was, we're always on them about, and this is a national North American thing. When you're doing your ambulance reports, they need to be detailed, they need to be complete, and I know it's just another BS report, but it's, first of all, it's an important record for that person's, their whole medical history, but secondly, when we go to do ambulance billing, when you leave stuff out of there, that's less to go back, that's less that we could go after to reclaim some revenue to help.
Well, that kind of gets back to what we were talking about in running things like a business. Again, you can't run a city entirely like a business because it just isn't one. It's got different pressures, it's got different rules, it's got a lot of variations on it that relate to the political environment that a business doesn't have. But when it comes to looking at the service you're providing, in the case of, for example, ambulance billing, you've got a service, you've got a rate for that service, you've got a rate for equipment and materials that you're using. It's set by the council. You're basically billing it and collecting it. Well, that's something that every business in America does. They bill for their services, they bill for their products, and they collect. And so you need to be able to run that part of your operation like a business. You just can't say, well, we billed it and it went out and it never came back. You have to follow up on it. You have to have the resources and the organization and the structure behind to follow up on that revenue source and get back what's rightfully the citizens' revenue. So, whether it's ambulance billing, whether it's water billing, whether it's collecting for fees at a park, whether it's constructing a project using internal services. These are all methods that can be used by cities before you rely on just slinging out a tax increase or relying on some new source of revenue. Kind of like you said earlier, you're looking at what you've got and doing it a little bit better.
Well, it kind of hit me. I'm listening to you explain that, and I'm realizing that I'm pissing off a lot of firefighters right now because there's literally, thousands that listen to this show, and I know those that go, so what's it like working? They stop by here, Claude, all the time and go, what's it like working for your mayor and council, your city manager? What's it like being at this fire department? And there's a lot of jealousy out there because some people don't have, unfortunately, they work for a bad chief. I bang on bad chiefs all the time that forget that they're there to be there for their people first. And it just, we mentioned it earlier. Our support, I was proud of the fact this year, this is kind of there's two sides to this. One is I told people, boss, how excited I was to be able to come in with as little of a request budget-wise as we did for as big an operation as we did. And I'm proud of that. But the flip side of that is we would have never gotten there without the support from you and the council. And I tell people, we have to, when you're in a process like it is here, and I say this proudly, you have to jump through probably about 155 flaming hoops to make a point and to prove what you're looking for, what you want as a genuine need. And about the time you get so frustrated is about the time you go, okay, let's go with it. And I tell people that the great part about that is you don't ever ask or end up getting anything that you don't really need, because he makes you prove to him that it's a genuine need. A lot of people end up spending money on stuff, Claude, where you go, you spent all this money on this, but yet you're suffering over here. It's not actually as bad. You know what I'm saying? It makes it harder for me to screw up, and Rick Lasky could screw up in a heartbeat. When you have to prove. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean,
what we're trying to do is make sure that when you're trying to educate a council that's not that familiar with any department's operations, or for that matter, the public, which is even less familiar with operations, you're trying to prove that you've like you said, you've gone through the hoops, you've done the analysis, you've done the work, you've demonstrated beyond any doubt that this is the way to do things, and this is what you need in order to get them done. So it has to do with maintaining that credibility over time. When I or you as a department head or anyone working for us has a level of credibility with the elected officials that's supported by a history of strong analysis and strong review, and making sure that you're just not throwing things out there just because someone said, well, we think we need to do this, or we think we need that piece of equipment or whatever, that you're buttressing those needs with facts and information. It goes a long way toward success. It goes a long way toward being able to convince people in the future. Usually where you get into problems is where you have a history, or someone perceives that there's a history of, they're just asking for that because they want it.
Right.
And they haven't spent any time really trying to figure out if there's another way of doing it, or if there's a better way of getting things done, or if there's another way of financing it. And sometimes that's unfortunately true. A lot of cities, I don't know that they have proper levels of review and analysis to make sure that that doesn't occur. Accountability,
yeah.
Credibility. Again, you're trying to maintain that over time, and so that you're trying to make sure that people understand that, we've gone through the process. We've got the facts here. All you got to do is look at it, work your way through it the way we did, and you'll draw the same conclusion that we did. And it becomes much easier for programs to be taken care of.
Well, and Claude, one of the things, again, one of the many things I'm proud of here is the fact that, in fact, I was just visiting with somebody right after staff outside about our programs, is the fact that for our fire department, our entire public education budget, the entire budget is $3,800, and people are amazed when they see all the programs we do. And I said, I'm not complaining. I'm proud of that, because not only do we work to get grants and get donations, the community really wants. I think if you just said, here's $100,000, Rick, go out and have fun with it pub ed wise, I think we'd be disappointing the community, because they really want to contribute and say that I'm helping the literacy program, the reading program, I'm helping this or whatever. How important, and I guess I know we're kind of different in a lot of places because we do a lot of customer service here as a city, but especially as a fire department too. How important are the programs you see the fire department doing here? I mean, obviously,
or public education.
Yeah, and just outreach. I mean, as a city manager, I mean, whether it's the reading program, we just did the school zone program, all the different things. How important are those programs to you as the boss around the city when it comes to something coming out of your fire?
Well, I think they're critical in again, educating people as to what is going on with the fire department or the police department or whatever department it is. Again, part of the difficulty that we have is making sure that people who are busy with their own lives, that have plenty to do and plenty on their plate, and they don't have a whole lot of time to come up to the city and learn about all of its operations, we need to make sure that they have at least a somewhat fundamental understanding of what we do.
Yeah.
What is the fire department about? Why are certain things done in certain ways? Why is the budget in a certain way? Why is this service provided in a certain way? And so educating people makes things so much easier on down the line. That to me, it's absolutely critical. Now, if you ask the average citizen, would you rather have the fire put out, the toilet flush, or someone educating the public? Chances are they're going to pick the first two, but by not picking the last one, it makes accomplishing the mission of the first two a little bit more difficult on down the line. So I think the role that something like Pub Ed can play is in the area of community relations and making sure, literally, that the public is educated on what it takes to provide the level of service they want for public safety. Because otherwise, they generally just don't know and don't understand it, and then that leads to people, criticizing or drawing conclusions that are not factually based, and then you're fighting off negatives. You're fighting off things that just are drifting out in a communication world of meaninglessness, and you really need to get back to communicating the positive messages instead.
Well, and it's the why do they need those fancy fire? And I tell people, if you hole up in your firehouse, if you shut the doors, if you don't go out and meet with the service clubs, like you mentioned, and I know we've talked about this, I even did it for your organizations that you belong to, your service clubs, is all right. Why do you send an ambulance? Why do you send a fire engine?
Why do you send an engine with an ambulance?
And once you explain it to them, they go, oh, but if you don't get out of, you're right, if you don't get out of firehouse, if you don't tell people what you do, we're not just about fighting fires anymore or running ambulances or cut people out of cars. We do a lot. I tell people, you have to be a full-service fire department. And that, you're right, if you don't go out and tell people, they're not. And
they have to understand what you're providing. They have, in order to make decisions later on. In worst-case scenario, let's say they did have to make some tough decisions about programs and budgets. Well, they've got to understand what the impacts of those decisions are. They have to understand, what am I going to lose if I don't do Pub Ed, or if I don't do this water line, or if I don't do mowing of a median or a park or something like that? What is the consequence of that? What's going to happen? And so the public education piece of it is critical to give the representatives of the citizens, which is the council, the ability to make decisions and choices. So, as you know, anytime that we have to spend a lot of time making sure that they're aware of what's going on and how something works, it's usually time well spent, because it makes it a lot easier on down the line as they're faced with more difficult decisions.
Well, I'm gonna put you on the spot here, because I get asked this question. I'm telling you everywhere I go, but our police, fire, honor guard. We've got a joint. We work separately but together, and our pipes and drums. You're just real quick, your feelings on that, because we would have never been able to put that together. I know, first of all, it helps to have a city manager that has a music background too and has a vested interest in music. But beside that,
music interest. I don't know if I'd call it a background.
Well, but how important do you feel? And this is what I try to tell people when we did the Keeping Tradition Alive symposium. I said, you need to ask my boss how important, or our mayor, how important they feel it is to have the pipes and drums at their own unit and their own honor guard at these different city events.
It's one of those critical intangibles. It's just one of those things that, no, you don't have to do that. That's not something that is necessarily going to make a response to a fire 30 seconds faster or anything like that, but it's an intangible that creates a sense of pride in the community, a pride in the organization. It's something that citizens can point to and say, you know what, there's part of the tradition and the past of the firefighting service that we didn't used to have, and it's a cool thing, it's a neat thing, and we like it, and we like having it, and we like them being able to participate in parades that we have as a community, and it helps to orient the department back into the community. And so again, it's kind of like the Pub Ed. When they see something like that, I think they look at it as not the Fire Department's Pipe and Drum Corps, but the City of Louisville Fire Department Pipe and Drum Corps. And that's something that they, like again in homecoming parades, you're side by side with the Louisville High School marching band, and you become integrated into the community in a way that you really could never do without something intangible like that. So, not to mention just that it's just kind of a lost art in many ways. That and of course down here in the South we haven't had as much of that as you see in the North or Northeast, but it's working its way down here, and I'm glad to play some minor part in that. Well,
the minor part is turned into a major part, Claude, because ask Damian Roberts, our pipe major, Texas, and I'll say this, and I'm they still call me Yankee. I've been out here 8 years, but I'm telling you, Texas is going to we're going to kick butt when it comes to pipes and drums. The bands that are starting up in the state.
Be careful. Your friends in New York might.
They love me.
I'll be making you make a phone call or two.
Little threatening email, but seriously, there are so many bands starting up. It's spreading like it's unbelievable, and it's exciting to see that. But you mentioned working with the band right next to our band from the high school and everything else. I'm blessed. Again, I've got a great partner at the police department, Chief Russ Curbo, and I have that relationship I had in Coeur d'Alene with Dave Skates when he was the police chief, where we're buddies, we're partners, we're friends. We even refer to ourselves publicly as each other's partner. What do you expect as a city manager when it comes to, because not everybody can pull that off. I mean, I used to be a police officer. I'm very, very partial towards dispatch and the police side of things. What do you expect, very bluntly, what do you expect on how you expect your police and fire departments to get along?
Basically, I'm looking for mutual understanding and cooperation. The departments have to function in that environment, and they're always going to have little flashpoints here and there, but you have to get past those. You have to get to those things that the departments have in common, and the missions of both departments overlap so often that they have more in common than I think either you or them might publicly admit. So in the chief positions, they're serving as leaders of those particular departments, and there's always going to be a certain amount of natural competition and natural separation between any department and another. But when it comes down to that incident or that particular problem that you're dealing with out in the field, and both departments come into play, all that gets dropped, and all that has to fall by the wayside, and has to be replaced by that understanding and cooperation that should be at the base of the pyramid, so to speak. You've got to have that support in both departments, and you've got to have both departments functioning together.
Especially even now with emergency management, if you're not working together, let alone with everybody in this city, we've already talked about how important it is for everyone to get along and be part of the team. How can you function when it comes to disaster preparedness?
Yeah.
Which leads me into...
Even small incidents these days overlap into so many different areas that the cooperation between all departments, whether it's police, fire, public services, streets, water, whoever it is, has to be present at all times, and you have to be able to set aside the little nitpicking types of things that can be aggravations and focus on the fundamentals and what you're really there for, which is to work with the rest of the people in the organization to make that service to the public as good as possible.
Well, and it kind of leads us into, I want to cover a couple more things before we run out of time, because this has been great. I know emergency management, disaster preparedness is very, very high on your priority list, as it should be. What are your? I mean, we've been through. We've done shelter. We're right here. We've had our share of things going on here in this area, let alone be able to assist our neighbors to the south. City managers' feelings on emergency management. What are your thoughts and your feelings on disaster? But the whole.
Well, I can tell you, and we haven't thankfully been, I would say, directly affected by a disaster of the scope that New Orleans or other areas have experienced in various types of events. But I will tell you that if you set set it aside and don't spend too much time on it, it's going to nip you in the future. Eventually, something's going to occur that you're not prepared for. And I think the one thing that everyone's learned over the course of a couple events here recently in the South is that there is no substitute for training. There is no substitute for practice and experience and making sure that you have the resources to deal with these events when they do occur. Now, you can't be 100% prepared, and you can't have 100% of the resources at all times, but you have to spend some time on this, or when the big event does occur, you're going to be so far behind the eight ball that you can't recover. And just our experience here in the last couple of weeks with evacuations from the New Orleans area happening much more seamlessly and much more effectively and efficiently than the first go-round, I think proves that out.
Well, I don't think anybody was prepared, as you and I talked about early on during Katrina, no one ever thought about long-term, long-range sustaining a shelter for weeks and a month. We've always been fairly good at, if we have to do something for 24 hours, so the Red Cross gets everybody a place. But
right.
who would ever thought?
Or if we just had to do something locally. It's kind of a failure of imagination to think, okay, what if an entire metropolitan area has to relocate? Where are they going to relocate to? You're talking about millions of people
and we
at one
just
time
did it.
Instead of just, a couple hundred.
And we just did it, and you said it earlier. It kind of worked about as flawlessly.
I think it worked about as well as you're going to get something like that to work. And again, was practice or was the prior experience and maybe some training and learning from mistakes part of the success of that story? I think the answer is yes. It's not to say that you won't have an event that doesn't have problems in the future. Sure as heck if I say that, then we'll have problems this week. But let's knock on wood.
Did everybody hear the wood I'm knocking on here?
Knock on wood and just rely on the fact that we think we can learn from our experience and learn from prior events as to what should happen and what shouldn't happen, and make things work the way they're supposed to.
Well, and we hit a home run here. We hired Summer Wilhelm as our emergency management coordinator. We stole her from out in Fort Worth, and she's just, she is. We have a lot of. I call it the dream team. I have the dream team in the way of a staff here for me. I've got the dream human resources director, Melinda Galler. Is every class I teach, when I get to that point, I talk about. I am so blessed because she is passionate about the employees.
And that's one of those things that, as you know, we debated and we did the analysis on that, and we did the cost benefit and trying to, how do we make sure that the council and citizens understand what the need for this position is, because you're basically funding a program that theoretically and actually you would hope in many ways you never have to use.
Yeah, exactly.
But in today's world, that's not realistic. And eventually, again, it may not be your disaster. It may be somebody else's disaster that you're dealing with. And having someone on board that's going to be focused directly on that and not have it as kind of a supplemental job or as job number 4 or 5 on their list, I think makes a big difference and can make a big difference in how successfully you deal with that type of thing in the future. So,
and I
am glad to have her here.
Oh, golly, she's incredible. But I was just saying, I know how much of a history buff you are, and when it comes to government, when it comes to great leaders of the past, and though it wasn't that long ago, it's kind of funny. You and I were just talking about this. General Schwarzkopf made the comment after 9/11 when the media interviewed him and said, first off, we've always had those 2 big oceans to protect us, but technology's taken it away. And then they said, General, do you ever think we'll get back to normal? He says, we'll get back to normal, but normal will have changed. And I tell people, look at where we're at. We're back to normal, but things have changed. And just like maybe, Claude, we were talking about earlier, just like out west, they red card all their wildland firefighters. And, during wildland season, you bring your luggage to the firehouse, and you may deploy for a week, and that's part of it. Mm-hmm. This is I think we're seeing history in motion here, where we're in the making, if you will. It's going to come when hurricanes come. We're going to be deploying people on a regular basis. We're going to be sheltering people, and then a few years from now, it'll be like, the norm.
When these natural occurrences happened in this country 200 years ago, they hit a lot of trees and vacant land. Now, one of the things I think we've seen in tornadoes in particular, which is another one of the big threats that we face here in North Texas, tornado sets down, and it's likely to hit some kind of a building or structure or human-occupied location, whereas years before, chances are it just bounced from field to field. Well, now you got a response that you're dealing with instead of just some photo taking, and so things are evolving. You're right. Kind of history moves on, and you have to position yourselves for the impacts that has as communities grow and as risks for those communities grow.
And history repeats itself, and we only get better by looking at it and predicting and dealing. I'm going to look at finishing things up. I want to ask you a couple quick things, and again, another one of the many things I brag about is we've got the leadership series that this city trains everybody from the bottom up to the top down, everybody in between. Sharon Cole coordinates everything for HR when it comes to our classes and our programs. And if anybody out there is trying to steal her, you're going to have to fight off a whole fire department here, because we'll beat you with a Halligan bar if you try to take her from us. Tell me about I'll let you crow a little bit about your staff. I mean, talk about take just maybe a couple of minutes. Talk about Donna and Steve and how important they are to you.
Well, they're the other part of the equation. We talked earlier about balancing out community and the issues that a council represents and the personalities on a council, and that's certainly part of it. But what makes that so much easier to do, even if you have volatile personalities in a council, is a staff that knows what they're doing, and a staff that takes care of the fundamentals, and a staff that gets things done. And again, I've been blessed in my career to have Steve Backus and Donna Barron as assistant managers, and a set of department heads that have that attitude and have that ability and have those skills to take care of business. And that way I don't have to do it. As you know, I'm kind of a hands-off manager. I like to hire people that know what they're doing and let them go.
God, you screwed up in the fire department, but anyway,
that's kind of my best example of that, actually.
Well,
so Steve, Donna, been here both in excess, I guess, combined experience there is more than 50 years. So again, I think the experience comes into play in making things easier when it comes to budgets or when it comes to programs or education of the public or council, and I don't think we could have got half as much done as we have over the last 10 or 15 years without them in that capacity. So, again, they're team players, and I can't emphasize that enough. You have to be able to set aside some of those little things that occur and focus on the team and focus on the greater good, and they're among the best at that.
Well, it's got to be neat. This morning I was sitting there thinking it when, we got Western Days coming up, when the police chief comes in dressed up as a marshal from the olden days, and the goofiness, and you look around the room and everybody's, we're taking care of business. It's serious on that end, but you look around, you go, this is our team. The directors.
It's one of those intangibles, just being able to set aside the press of daily events and sometimes just relax and sometimes just enjoy each other's company. And sometimes, I don't know that organizations do that often enough. There are some that do it better than others, some that base their entire business model around that type of attitude and that type of camaraderie. And you need to balance that out. You can't be about partying all the time or yucking it up and having fun all the time. You have to balance that out against the needs of the job and the perception of the public. But if you can do all that and still enjoy each other's company, I think it goes a long way.
Well, the team works better. I remember up when Steve Judy was the mayor of Coeur d'Alene. Sandy Bloom's up there now. She's incredible. We were talking about her in one of the previous shows. But I remember a couple citizens got upset, and they came up to him during this one event. It was the city picnic, and they were like, I can't believe you're letting these people, these are my tax dollars. He says, look, these people work round the clock. They come in, they do more than you could imagine, and we're going to take one day of the year for a few hours and let them just relax, kick back, enjoy the moment. They're going to be better at what they do. They're going to serve you better, and a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, again, public education can go a long way to making people understand. If you can anticipate that type of thing and be prepared with a response that's as articulate as what you just described, then people usually go, well, you're right. I didn't think about it that way, and I probably shouldn't have flown off the handle. I think if most people sit back and then they sort through things with a common set of facts, that they'll generally draw the same conclusions. So again, sometimes you just have to spend some time making sure they understand what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, last biggie here. I'm going to ask you to look into the Claude King City Manager's crystal ball. Everything. I mean, we got fuel costs going up. We've got fuel costs just presenting a problem. Everything else, a big presidential election coming up, and all this different stuff. I mean, Louisville, whatever. Where do you see things going? I mean, is
you want me to predict the presidential election?
No, not that. Just that's the big question. Is God, do you think are we going to keep losing money revenue wise, or is the economy going to get a little bit better? Is it just
kind of like you said earlier, I think history moves on, and you can't ignore it. You have to kind of sometimes look around you and take a bigger picture approach to what's going on within your community, within your state, within the country itself, within the world itself, and try to make some educated guesses as to how things are going to turn out. I think cities and states and the federal government certainly is going to be under continuing pressure in terms of revenue. I think there are trends out there that indicate that taxpayers are reaching a point where they're very concerned about what they're getting for their tax dollar, and maybe reaching a point where they're just going to set things in motion that limit those tax dollars. I know here in Texas there's bills at every legislative session that are designed to basically arrest the growth of municipal budgets, and that's going to put additional pressure on councils to make tough choices. I frankly believe that some of that's misplaced, because I think fundamentally those decisions can be made and are made at the local level right now, and if people don't want to pay for some of the services, they need to come up here and express themselves during budget hearings and make their elected officials understand that. But again, I think we're going to be functioning in an environment of lesser resources in the future, and so everyone's going to be charged with coming up with better, more efficient ways of doing things. Then on the other side of the equation, you're faced with higher costs, and so anything you can do to slow the growth of costs in an operation are going to be absolutely critical. So, whether it's, I don't know that there's too much we can do about fuel costs until they come out with battery-powered fire engines, but there's other things that we can look at, and there's other ways of slowing the cost growth down, and those are just realities that everyone's going to have to take a look at. And I guess the third thing is just, the balancing act that councils do between the services that they provide in various areas of the city is going to be under pressure. I think that they're going to have to make some tough decisions in the future as to what they do want to do, and it may be that we can't do as much of something as we have done in the past, and we may have to cinch our belts and maybe put some things aside until some point in the future that it's easier to accomplish. So I think there's some tighter times coming. Hopefully we can get past them and things speed up, and global economy picks up and makes a lot of those easier to deal with, but time will tell.
Well, and that brings up that whole side of the team definition that we don't spend enough time on. That when we're talking to folks is, we talk about being family and all this, but we don't talk about the responsibility that goes with being part of the team and being part of the decision-making process. And just like you said, making things work and using, being good stewards of the taxpayer's dollar and doing the best you can for them and your folks. And Claude, I can't thank you enough for spending time with us. And to our listeners, there you have it. A lot of you, so many have been asking, about my boss and how does he feel about this and how does he make things run, and hearing the city manager's side of things, because we don't often hear that in the fire service. We hear what the chief often wants to tell us. So hopefully a lot of you out there, there's a little bit better understanding that it takes, we're not in the vacuum. There's more going on in the city or your township or your district than just the fire department. It takes cooperation. It takes good leadership. All the things that our boss just discussed with everybody. And I have to thank you, Claude. I've done this before, not to put
no problem.
But thanks for letting me be your fire chief. You brought me to my son. I tell people all the time, Claude. I left Coeur d'Alene, which when people have been to Coeur d'Alene go, wow, look at this place, how could you leave here? And when I tell people I left for family reasons, and I'm part of a great organization with a great fire department again, but you gave me so far 8 years with my son, and I'm indebted to you for that. You made that happen by taking a chance and hiring, a half Polak, half Italian to come and run the fire department here, and I appreciate that. But thanks so much for spending time with us
today. Coming from Hamtramck, Michigan, I was relating to the first half. So.
Well, thanks so much for spending
time
with us. We've been visiting with
Claude
Claude
King.
King.
Happy to do it.
Oh, outstanding. Thanks, boss. We've been visiting with Claude King, city manager with the city of Louisville, Texas, and a lot of great information. If you have any questions, or if you wanted to zip Mr. King an email, I'm sure he wouldn't mind. He's busy, but he'll eventually probably get to it. If it's just a question, I know that people have sent a couple to our mayor before, but and Claude, that would be
at cityoflouisville.com.
cking@cityoflouisville.com. I love the email system here because they make it so easy.
It's easy
when you're telling people.
Too easy.
But anyway, hey, Claude, thank you again, and appreciate your time. And to all our listeners out there, as we end this each time, do anything you can to be better at what you're doing. Remember what it takes to love the job. It just takes something from inside, and it's called your heart, a little bit of passion, and probably the biggest point we always make when we end the show, we end it with two words, and that's be safe.